For those latecomers to the party, my name is Robin, and you were handed as you came in a little booklet with the superpowers that we're here to foster today: empathy, motivation, and up next, collaboration. So if you haven't already pulled that out, and what I'd like you to do is, we've already heard 2 incredible talks. Mark down on the right-hand side of your booklet where you think you fall now as a result of these talks. And this is changeable. We're going to continue to change this over the rest of the time we have together today. But write down for Amy's talk on empathy, for Dustin's on motivation, what you've learned. And you can use this to continue to take notes. Our next speaker and our last speaker is an illustrator, a designer, the author of the recently published book, Discussing Design. Adam and his MadPow team look at company culture and all of the ways that it is expressed and reinforced. Adam is coming on stage to share with us specific tools that we can use to take back to our own companies to create more collaborative, more conducive to creativity company cultures. Please welcome Adam Connor.
Everybody. So about a year and a half ago, I woke up in ICU. I had gone to the emergency room with a fever the night before of about a little over 105 and had passed out and proceeded to spend the next 2 weeks there. And that was a really boring time. In that time, I got to know my nurses pretty well. I had a lot of conversations with them. And what I found that nurses like to do when they've got a patient who's doing okay and perfectly happy to talk is they like to bitch. They like to complain a lot. And they complain about everything. And most often, what they were complaining to me about were the devices that they had to use, and the tools they were given, and the processes they had to follow. And being a designer, that didn't bother me at all. This was research for me. I could ask them all sorts of questions about what it was that they didn't like, what they found challenging. But what was always interesting to me is sometimes they would show me the devices, or they would tell me about a system. And many of those things, I knew people who had worked on them. I knew designers and business folks who had actually been responsible for creating those devices. And these are people that are smarter than I will ever hope to be. So why were these products and services so challenging? Why is it that these organizations who have brilliant, clever minds working for them still manage to put out things that frustrate people so much? And this isn't just in the healthcare industry. This is all over the place. Windows 7 was a massive design failure. Anybody here remember Quickster? It lasted for about a day before it was pulled. I don't even think it actually made it to release. It was just announced as a concept before consumers erupted over what Netflix planned to do. And then we have something like the Fire Phone, right? Millions and millions and millions of dollars poured into this thing. Complete flop. So why is it that these organizations that, again, have large pools of brilliantly clever designers, why is it that they keep putting out things that aren't really working? The team that I work with, that we focus on, is about understanding that organizations need more than just to have design talent present. Having design talent does not ensure design success. There are a lot of other things that go into making sure that creative ideas are allowed to come up, be evaluated, be pursued, and eventually make it out into people's hands. Organizations need to have a culture that supports creativity, that allows people to work together to generate ideas, to be collaborative, to actually focus on the design, on the creative aspect. Organizational culture is this shared set of beliefs that direct how people within the organization interact and how they behave in given situations. It's not, oh, we wear jeans and we go out for drinks after work. It's this core set of beliefs that direct us. It's the way I'm interacting with you right now. It's the way I interact with my teammates. It's what I think I'm supposed to do at any given time. That's our culture. The culture of your organization is basically its operating system. And if that operating system is one that gets in the way of creativity, of good design, then no matter how much talent you have, it's not going to work. Deming said, a bad system will beat a good person every time, and it's true. I've watched many of my friends working in organizations get burnt out, just trying to make a dent, trying to do good work, but running completely into the same walls every time, over and over and over again. Because an organization's ability to take advantage of the talent and the creative ideas that are there already in its employees is directly proportional to their support and hindrance of the design process and the conditions needed for design to flourish. So I want to cover 5 basic beliefs that I've found working with organizations that are good at collaboration, that are successful with creative ideas. The first is that everyone is part of the creative process. Design is not something that happens off in a corner. Design is not something that only the designer does, right? Design is a process of making decisions. It's a way of looking at a problem, understanding who that problem affects, the context in which that problem arises, and the medium we're going to use to try to solve that problem, and creating a solution. So it's not just how your product or service looks. It's not just about the content that goes into it. It's about everything that it does. And so everyone is a part of that process. The next is that just because people are collaborating does not mean that you don't have a need for leadership. Leadership in a collaborative space means that that leader has to be inspiring and empowering. They have to give people the autonomy and the freedom to use their skills to work towards a collective vision. They have to know when to tap people within the group to help create that vision. This is not dictatorial. This is not about telling people what they're going to do. It's about getting the group to work together. Good collaborative creative organizations understand that before we can solve a problem, we all have to understand it. And so everybody participates in that understanding and working through that research. And they also understand that learning is a part of the process. It doesn't just happen up front, but it happens throughout. Every single time we create something, whether it be a sketch, a prototype, the beta, the actual product, anytime we create something and we put it out there, we have an opportunity to learn. And we need to incorporate that learning into what we do. And this gives us the grounds for an iterative process. And that's why they understand that the process itself never ends. You keep going. You keep taking what you've learned and building it into the product. And these are just some of the many beliefs that these organizations have, but they're the ones I found most critical. Now, many of you have probably read plenty of articles on collaboration and creativity. You've heard about it at other events, so I'm not going to go very deep into these things now. The thing I want to focus on, though, is that in those articles, in those discussions, it's often focused on in the context of a small group of people or creativity in an individual. But how do we scale that up? How do we create collaborative, creative organizations. How do we change our organization's culture so that we can actually do this kind of work, so that we can change the way we work to allow us to be more creative and collaborative? The first step is to understand that there are 3 systems at work in any organization. And these 3 systems help you understand your organization's culture. The first is the formal or rational system. This is something we're all familiar with. This is your organizational hierarchy or the formal processes or policies that get documented. Everybody in an organization typically knows what this is. And this is where many change efforts focus, because this is the most visible. But then there's this second system, the natural or adaptive system. Everybody's probably familiar with this too, because chances are, in that rational or formal system that you're a part of, you've run into problems, and you've had to find workarounds. You've learned that it's easier, rather than following the documented process, to just go to a specific individual. So in this system, people develop those workarounds, and they follow them over and over and over again. And then we have a third system, which is the open system. And this is basically examining your organization as part of a larger ecosystem of other organizations. So imagine a hospital. Hospitals exist within a region. In that region, there are other organizations like community centers, clinics, schools, community organizations. And the presence, the needs, the attitudes of those organizations are going to influence what that hospital does, what kinds of services it needs to provide, how it handles certain situations. So looking at these 3 systems, we can see that our culture actually manifests in a number of ways. And that's what you need to understand next. Within your organization, what are all those manifestations? Organizational culture really breaks down and shows up in a variety of things that we do and we create. So we have skills and knowledge, the things people do and know. We have tools and processes, the things we purchase or subscribe to that allow us to do our work. We have our formal structure and roles, as well as informal structure and roles. We have communication and language, the way we talk to one another and the words that we use, the shared meanings of those words. We have the physical environment, the spaces in which we actually work, the policies we create for how we handle internal situations. We have incentives like compensation, right? And we have values and assumptions. These could be espoused values, the kinds of things that organizations plaster all over marketing booths like the ones in the exhibit hall today. And they can be demonstrated values, which are the values that actually drive the way we behave. And these things represent our culture. They reflect what we truly believe and how we behave. But understanding these things as a reflection isn't enough. We also have to understand that these things form a network. And in this network, these items reinforce each other. So for example, structure and roles can reinforce the tools and the processes we use, or the skills and knowledge that people have, or the incentives that we provide to our employees. And our incentives can reinforce and direct the tools and processes that we use, the values and assumptions that float to the top, the communication and language that we use. So we get this self-reinforcing network, and this is why change is so hard in an organization, because very often people pick one thing to focus on. But if you just try to change one of these things, all of the other items within the network will try to change it back. They will resist that change. But we do have to start somewhere. And what my team has found working through these challenges is that it's always best to start with values and assumptions, because this helps us understand where we are and where we want to go. And in order to follow that, we have to use the design process. So we begin by understanding the current organizational culture. We need to represent that some way. We need to be able to talk about it. What are our beliefs? What are our behaviors? What are the things that are getting in the way of how we want to work? What is the way we want to work? So we need to envision that future. What's the culture that we want to have? Where do we want this to go? How do we want to be able to collaborate? How do we want to be able to create new ideas? And we have some really great tools for doing this. We have culture maps from Dave Gray, which are just conversation pieces, ways to get a group to talk about their beliefs and their behaviors, the things that they see in themselves and in their colleagues, and the aspects of their organization, the levers like tools, processes, policies that are influencing those things or perhaps inhibiting them. But talking in the abstract like this can sometimes be challenging, so we can use another tool, like a journey map or a process map. And we can turn that inwards and look at how we work together over a project, over a certain process. We can identify a specific point in time and say, tell me what's going on here. Who's doing what? Is that a pain point? Is that successful? And we can use that to spur our conversation. And then we have things like the COM-B model, which comes from our behavior change discipline. What this loosely states is that in order for a behavior to take place, people have to have the right balance of capability, motivation, and opportunity. And if anything is missing from these three things, that behavior is not going to happen. And so using this model, we can actually map those manifestations. Capability, we have skills and knowledge. Opportunity, we have processes and tools, environment, policies, communication and language, structure and roles. And in motivation, we have values and assumptions, incentives, and again, structure and roles. And when I talk to organizations and use this model, what I like about it is it very quickly gets people to realize that in order to change an organization, it's not just about training. And that's the common request I get. Help us change. Train us how to be more design-centered. But training only goes so far. We have to pay attention to the other aspects of the organization. So once we have that conversation, once we've understood where we are, we know where we want to go, we can start to identify and find the opportunities between the two. We can generate ideas for how we might go from one to the other. What kinds of policies can we change? What kinds of processes can we change? How can we change the language that we're using, right? We select and implement some of those. We look at the ones that we are actually capable of changing and pick the ones that seem like they'd have the most impact. We start to make some of those changes. And then we need to analyze the results of that. How did that go? Did we get the results we were looking for? And then we need to be iterative. We need to keep going because this is a long-term process. Throughout this process, we need to make sure that we are infusing empathy. Amy talked a lot about having empathy for patients or users or customers. And that's absolutely true. We should make sure that the people in our organization know who we're designing for and what they're going through. But we often forget to have empathy for our colleagues. And so often we put people in these buckets of who they are, the role they're supposed to fill, like design, business, and development. And then we create these weird walls between them, right? And we just huck things over the walls at each other. Oh, that's business's responsibility. Oh, I have my requirements. I'm going to toss that over to design, right? And this creates these disconnects. And it can also give us a very poorly shaded view of each other. We can start to become adversarial, competitive, territorial. So we need to break down these walls. We need to understand what's driving people in the business or people in development to act a certain way or behave a certain way. What are their objectives? What are they trying to do? Maybe it's that their executives have told them to strive towards a different set of goals. And as we start to build this empathy, we can maybe find a way to bridge those gaps. And so collaboration is really the operationalization of empathy. It's us understanding each other and wanting to work together because we have that shared understanding. You also need to understand your influence. Very often, people will come to me and they want to change the way their whole organization works. And I'll say, well, that's great. So can I meet and talk with everybody in your organization? No, it's just my team, just the design team, or just the development team. All right, well, I need you to understand that that's going to change what we're able to do right now. So the way I've taken to actually helping people understand this is I get them to draw me an ecosystem. And it often looks something like this: heads with labels and arrows pointing back and forth. And then I say, OK, now draw a line around everybody who's going to participate in this effort. And so they do. And there's some heads in there, and there's some arrows in there. And I say, OK, well, everybody who's within this line, they're people that we have direct influence with, right? We have both sides of the equation. We can set up activities. We can build empathy between both sides. And we can change any of the processes, the tools, the things that take place within this boundary. And then we have to think about the people that we have indirect influence over, the people whose arrow crosses that line. These are people who aren't going to participate, who aren't actively going for the change. So we have to make some assumptions. We have to try to figure out what their objectives are, and we have to tailor our interactions with them to that. And then we have this third layer, this viral influence. These are people that we hope, if we're successful with the first two layers, they will pick up on these changes in behavior, and they will start to use them themselves. The thing I want you to take away from this is that no matter where you are in your organization, you have the ability to influence the culture around you. You don't have to be an executive or a leader of some kind. All you have to do is look for ways to build trust with the people you work with and start asking the right questions. And if you do that, you can start to change the culture and the way you work. We also need to make sure that we redefine productivity. We've gotten into this trap of thinking that productivity is all about how much we produce, how many lines of code we write, the volume of what we create. But we need to incorporate learning into that. How much have we learned about the situation we're designing for? How many decisions can we make now that we couldn't make before? What's the quality of those decisions? What's the effectiveness of those outcomes? If we start to redefine productivity this way, we create much better solutions. Intentionally changing culture is something that requires dedication. We need to be persistent. We need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to iterate. Typically, I encourage groups to put some kind of champion in place that will help drive this along, because it's going to take a long time. But we can do it. We can create more collaborative, creative cultures. Thank you very much.